Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the second presentation by Gary Wintz. This morning he will be speaking on touring North Korea. Absolutely fascinating. And Gary Wintz is one of the few Americans who has been to Korea. In fact, he's been there a number of times, starting with his first trip there in 1975. Gary Wintz, you read the program, he has been to over 220 countries, colonies, and territories, which I've never met anyone who has even probably been to 100 countries, colonies, and territories, and he has doubled that. Quite remarkable. I mentioned yesterday that he also kicked off our 2012 Thailand semester and our 2014 Turkey semester because of his expertise in those countries. I think no matter what country we picked for the theme semester, he could come and give lectures. He's a professional tour guide leader. A week from today, he's going to be in Burma preparing to lead a group of tourists on a river cruise. He's also speaking again at 11 today on religions and spirituality on the Korean Peninsula. Please join me in welcoming Gary Wintz once again.
While we're here on these pictures that are going right now, I want to watch for it again. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in actually a video. Can you see this screen back here? This is actually people. 20,000 people holding up placards about this big, and at a certain signal, every few seconds, they change it. Once again, this is 20,000 people, each with their own placard, all changing these pictures together, all at the click with a choreographer there, or they have a whistle or a signal, or they count in their minds. They all know, they all work as one organism, changing images. So you have to imagine they're sitting there in the bleachers, and they've got this stack of placards at their feet, and they're moving one up and holding it, and then they're getting the other one with the other hand, and then they move it up like that. These, you understand? Can you believe it? These are like pixels. Human pixels, 20,000 pixels, this sign. So this is at a stadium, like a soccer stadium, that holds 130,000 people. So we were sitting across the fields. This would be the field down below here. And there's a show going on all this time. This is just the background of the show. So you got these, I mean, it's like a human miracle. It shows what a group of people can do. Unfortunately, this is a forced regime, a totalitarian regime that commands that you're going to be a placard holder this year and maybe for the next 30 years of your life, and you have to show up at these grand performances. Once again, out here, you can see more clearly. You can actually see the heads of people. Again, these are individual placards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can see the heads. You can actually see the heads of people. They're probably not supposed to be showing their heads. They're probably going to lose their head for doing that. Anyway, we'll see some video of this performance. What I want to do right now, because has to be a fast-moving talk. We've got lots to cover in a short amount of time. What I want to do is show you the main areas in North Korea where people can travel. So my last groups in recent years continue to expand. We get to go to more and more places. So the last tour I did, it was like a 19-day tour. So of course the main part was in Pyongyang, the capital. This is the area that has about 4 million population in the general metropolitan area of the city. This is really the head. I mean, there's only 24 million people in the whole country. Almost 3.8, almost 4 million live in the general area of Pyongyang. And that's where we spent most of our time because that is the show city. That's where they put all the money to impress people, to show how modern they are. They got 100-story high skyscrapers, which don't work. They haven't figured out how to get the elevators working yet. Been standing there for years. But they do these kinds of big projects as kind of showpiece. So the whole city of Pyongyang is really a showpiece. And we spent 4 or 5 days there, and we were busy. We had lots to do and see, lots of monuments, mausoleums to Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. They're like almost temples or cathedrals to these founders and the father and the son of the founders of the communist regime of the North. But let's take a tour around the whole country here quickly, just to give you some idea of other places where we go. Sarawon, this area we go down to, and this is interesting for tourism for a number of reasons. First of all, this whole area, excuse me, is dotted with remnants from the past, including tombs of kings that are quite majestic and quite large in acreage. Some of them over 100 acres of mounds of kings' tombs in this area. Also, there's what's called a traditional folk village, which is a mock-up of what a village used to look like before modernization. Quite frankly, it's what villages still look like today, but they don't take you to those because they want you to think the whole country is a modern, happy place and latest state-of-the-art of everything. So they have this mock-up down here. So you actually walk through a village. No one's living in these buildings, but it shows you the grass with a straw straw roofing and houses built on pillars. And it shows you how people used to live with a heating system under the house. For example, even in Korea today, many of the houses in the countryside, the way they heat their houses in their very cold winters, they're not far from Siberia, the way they heat their houses, they actually have like a fireplace pit right under the floor of the house, but the floors are built with, 2 feet of clay, so there's no chance of fire. But they just built a huge, be like having a fireplace down in your basement, and just, having them burning wild. But of course it's a smaller, more contained area. So you see how they did their, and I have stayed in Korea in wintertime in houses like that, and they're woozy warm. I mean, they got, heating from the floor, so you can sleep on the floor and be warm in the heart of winter. Then there's also a Buddhist temple here, and there's one Buddhist monk there, or let's put it this way, he's probably a Communist Party member, and he dresses up in a Buddhist robe and does the bowing and pretends like he's Buddhist. Because there's no religion is permitted in North Korea. There are Buddhists in North Korea, they just don't say it. They practice quietly, and there are Christians in North Korea, they just don't tell anybody. Atheism is the national religion of North Korea, and no other religions are really tolerated. Then down at Panmunjom at the border. Now this is a very interesting area. This is the DMZ line, the 38th parallel, and the Panmunjom border area. I also visited I was here in 1975 on the Korean side, but I also came up from the South Korean side, so I got to see it from 2 very different perspectives. And you can still do that today. Today's September 1st. Today, a new law has been instituted at the U.S. State Department. Americans may no longer travel to North Korea. Starts today. In case you wanted to go there, you're a day too late. Hopefully, someday that will change. Then another area famous in North Korea is Kumgang Mountain. And it's also right on the border. It's one of the highest mountains, and it is the most sacred mountain in all of Korea. So South Koreans come here as tourists sometimes to go to this sacred mountain. I remember the first time I was on this side of the border in 1965, I went to Seoraksan, which is the next most sacred mountain in Korea, and that's where the South Koreans can go. And you can actually see Diamond Mountain, it's Kumgang Mountain, from Seoraksan. So these 2 most sacred mountains of the whole nationality of the Korean nation, that's both North and South Korea together, because these people are all one people. They just happen to be separated since the end of World War II, when the Japanese let go of their colony. The Soviets took over the northern part and supported a communist regime, and the Americans took over the southern part, supported a democratic regime in the south. Then typical other places we travel to are up Mount Paektu. They say this Mount Paektu has a crater lake, just like Crater Lake in Oregon. Anybody been there? It kind of looks like that. And it's said to be the highest crater lake in the world, but the Koreans tend to exaggerate things, so I'm not sure it's the high. I wouldn't be surprised if Crater Lake in Oregon is higher than this one, but it might be in the neighborhood. And around this area, this is a very famous area in North Korean history. So first of all, there's a national myth that says the beginning of the Korean people started here. The first Koreans, as we know them, speaking that language, that they came from this area. But historians say, that's got to be a myth. Why would somebody start at the highest elevation? You would want to be down in the lowlands to start your civilization. So, but these are the Korean myths, and the North Koreans have added on to this myth by the son of Kim Il-sung. So Kim Il-sung was the founder of the Korean Democratic People's Republic of Korea in 1945. And his son, Kim Il-sung, was said to have been born here during the guerrilla time. So Kim Il-sung got his start by being an anti-Chinese guerrilla. And he became a communist. He was supported by the Russians, fighting the Japanese also. So up here is called Secret Camp. That's the name of it. And this is the place where Kim Il-sung and his guerrilla buddies really held down the fort in starting their revolution against throwing out the Japanese. And so this is a historical site for a number of reasons. It's the supposed mythical birthplace of the Korean people. It's the place of nature, one of the greatest places really in the world. It's this crater lake up on the top of this mountain. It's also the birthplace of Kim Jong-il, the son of Kim Il-sung. But again, historians say they made that up. They're just trying to emphasize the deity, that's the deification of these three leaders now, all really a monarchy rather than a Marxist government. So all three leaders of Korea since the founding have all from one same family. What kind of communism is that? The communists were supposed to be against the royalty and monarchy, but in fact we have a new monarchy now, but it holds on to the teachings of Marxism in other ways. So this whole area they have like a war museum up here. They have a village that has the largest monument. It's like 100 figures, bronze statues, the second largest statue in the whole country. And they got some large statues, the North Koreans. I've seen some pictures of those once in a while. I can't get over this. Here it is again. These are human beings making this like a billboard out of pixels, out of placards. Then up here, we also go up here. I was just up here a couple of years ago, Cheongjin, which is it's the second largest city in North Korea, and which isn't that large. It's about 500,000 people, but it's an industrial area, lots of factories up here. And you can see this is very close to the Russian border. The Russian border is just this little section right here, and all the rest of this is Chinese border, all along here. So this is the border that MacArthur is threatening in the late 1950, and the Chinese Maoist Chairman Mao launched 100,000 of his troops across that border, pushed MacArthur all the way back down below along the coast, where they had to hold their ground until they were able to get reinforcements, and eventually the two countries got divided at the 38th parallel, 1953. But up in this area is a lot of beaches, and also this was a revolutionary area. That is, a lot of revolutionary battles took place up here, and that's part of what they show you in their tourism. It's not just beaches, not just beautiful nature all along here. By the way, this is all mountainous, heavily mountainous, not much agriculture, not much population, but it's beautiful for tourists. There's even a ski resort up here, which we've been to, but there was no snow at the time because it was September. So that's a general rundown of the main places that you can see in North Korea. And I do want to talk about the pains involved. But I should first say, every group I have ever had to North Korea, mostly Americans, at the end of the tour, I asked them, what's your assessment? When you go home, what are you going to say to people? First of all, was it worth coming here? Absolutely yes. What about it? You said it was fascinating. Fascinating is the key word that comes out of everybody's mouth. They found it, quotes, far more fascinating than they had ever imagined. And it's not just the beauty and the scenery and the beaches and the mountains and the history that we saw. It's more that this is sort of like a human social experiment. And it's the last of an ideological species. You know, communism has been on its way out ever since the fall of the Soviet Union. And even though some countries are still communist by name, and even in practice when it comes to political freedoms or lack thereof, such as China. China is definitely a communist totalitarian country yet when it comes to people saying if they can have democracy or not. They can't even talk about that. Do you know the word democracy isn't even allowed on their internet? When you type in the words democracy, you get a blank in China. So it's still a communist country in many ways. Of course, economically it's freer. And so all these other countries like Vietnam, Laos, Cuba, these are still communist countries, but not so much economically anymore. But definitely they still don't allow a lot of freedoms. But North Korea is the only one of those, all the few communist countries that remain today that are still old-style Marxist, Leninist, Stalinist, Maoist, hard line. And that means they have these propaganda things like this kind of stuff. That means they run on the big lie, like saying you live in the workers' paradise. And so they also want to communicate this to tourists. So they really like tourists to come. One is they get to earn hard-needed dollars. Secondly, it gives them a chance to show off. So that's why Pyongyang is such a really fascinating modern city with lots of monuments, wide boulevards, beautiful parks. It really is a breathtaking city, and the groups, they like it for that. But at the same time, you have this facade that's always up. Like we went to a hospital in Pyongyang, and it's like chandeliers in the hallways, and the waiting rooms are luxurious furniture. And we walk into the operating room, and it's like the latest state-of-the-art equipment. It's spotlessly clean, but there's nobody there. And we say, well, where are the patients? They say, oh, well, there'll be an operation here later in the day, you know. But you can tell, like it's just a showpiece. And you can bet if we actually walked into a real hospital anywhere in the country, it would likely be the pits, because the hotels are. The hotels are not that nice. So, every tourist that goes to North Korea, they know they're going to have to sacrifice. The hotels are not very good. The food is not very good, even though they're putting their best food in front of you because they want to impress you and show you how advanced they are. But, we can see, wow, if this is their best, what's a bad meal like here? So that's not why tourists don't go to eat well and stay in nice They want to see the last remaining ideological species on Earth of Marxist Lenin and see how do people operate? Is it really as oppressed as it seems? And it is. Now, one of the things they make us do, even before we arrive, there is a British company that organizes tours from Beijing. They're based in Beijing. These are British guys that live in Beijing, but they have good relations with the North Koreans. They know how to say the right words, and they train any tourist, including the Americans, before coming. First of all, they tell you, if you're not interested in bowing once in a while in front of one of these statues of their god kings, Kim Il-sung, the first communist leader, and his son Kim Jong-il, if you're not willing to go up and bow in front of the statue once in a while, don't even think about coming on this trip, because they're going to ask you to do it. They're not going to force you to do it. They're not going to make you do it, but if you don't do it, it's not good. And so they make you sign a statement saying, I agree, I'm not going to make a big issue about bowing. I agree, I'm willing to bow in front of these statues. And another agreement they make you sign is you may not take any photographs that you have not been given permission to take. That is, any site you go to, you have to ask permission to take pictures. Now, it's not as complicated as it may sound, because what happens when you arrive at a site, like let's say it's a big plaza with statues of Kim Il-sung or something, they'll say, you may take pictures anywhere in this area. But if you're driving down the road, can you take a picture? Only if you ask permission. So one time we were up in the far north up here. I'll never forget this, driving along here in this area, all rural area. And we drove past a village sitting on the slopes of a hill. And it was a beautiful village, very organic looking. No power lines going into it, straw roofs. It was beautiful, it was idyllic. And everybody goes, oh, can we take a picture here? And the guy says, no. We go, well, you know, there's no military camp around there. There's, you know, not even any people in the picture. There's no soldiers. Why? He says, you cannot take a picture. Why? You cannot take a picture. Don't ask why. You made an agreement. The only thing we could figure out why they didn't want us to take that picture is because it was a beautiful organic village without power lines, which means it's not a worker's paradise, which means they don't have electricity everywhere, which means the people are living a pretty poor, simple life, and they don't want you to see that. So I'm going to continue talking now, and I'd like to show some more slides. We're going to switch DVDs here, and there are going to be about 20 more slides on that as I talk about our trip in. And then we're going to show some video of these performances that go on. By the way, and we can change that now. And by the way, the tickets, these are called masked games, by the way. The tickets to see this kind of performance is 2 hours with lovely music. We've got some music to it too. You'll hear it, the Arirang, the most famous song in both Koreas. There's one song in all Korea for centuries that's been their favorite melody, Arirang, and we will hear that in the background. Yesterday, we had one Korean in the audience, only one that we know. One Korean was in the audience. I said, could you sing Arirang for us? And of course I knew she knew how to sing it. She's Korean. And she was real shy, you know. And I, oh, please, I said, just sing a little bit of it. It was so beautiful. And we'll hear that music going on in the background. But I'll be talking to you also as we look at this material. So the first slides that you saw that we're showing on here when you walked in and we're showing until now were taken by my good friend Grace Fritzinger. She agreed that I could show. And see the man on the top left over there, Gary Flax, he's a medical doctor from Miami. This is his DVD. So this is what your visa card looks like into North Korea. So these first pictures he shows of really the group starting out in Beijing and landing at the airport in North Korea. And these actually are not that interesting of pictures, but in a few minutes, and I'll keep talking throughout, but in a few minutes we'll move into actually seeing video of these mass games, these performances. A North Korean flight attendant. There's a picture of Kim Il-sung, the founder of the Communist Democratic People's Republic, and a picture of him like there are everywhere. Now this picture, these pictures, I'm not sure he got permission for these pictures because these don't look that nice. So this is like coming into town. There's all these propaganda signs all the time. Everywhere you look, you know, the signs saying how lucky you are to be living in the workers' paradise. And here's the Soviet realist type style statuary, you know, always, you know, big and proud. And we are the North Koreans, and we're #1 in the world, and we have the biggest army, and we're the strongest, and we're the best trained, and look how beautiful our buses are, and how beautiful our Korean women are. And here's something else you see people wearing. This is on a polo shirt that somebody smuggled in, or maybe copied, and wearing a picture of Kim Il-sung. So everywhere you go, there are pictures of Kim Il-sung. This would have been back in the 50s. Here's a portrait of Kim Il-sung and his son Kim Jong-il. So Kim Il-sung is the grandfather of the present leader Kim Jong-un, who's like 33 years old now. This is inside of our hotel. And by the way, there is beer around. That's one good thing. And if you don't have food, at least you got good beer. And we discovered that early and continue to take advantage of that fine quality. And you can see this waitress, you can see she probably slipped a few drinks there at the time. action. This was a welcoming performance we had. Notice all their ID cards. This is all communists, under control, knowing your name. So now this is the stadium where these performances go on that we were looking at pictures of. As we enter the stadium, there's a monument to a rose. So it's a huge stadium that also serves as a soccer field and other sports performances. So here's this background again. Again, this is stadium seats we're looking across from. So these are individual pixels of human beings creating these images with the crowds in front. This is the song I'll Be Wrong. See the heads of people in here in the background. And be quiet for this melody. They're not playing it now, but I hear it again. We'll stop and listen to it because it's so nice, and it's really, that's a nice pixel there. So, some of the problems we had on the trip were related. So I was saying to you how the materials ahead of time that we signed a statement on, it says that you cannot take photos, that you sign these forms. So actually I had one person actually get busted for disobeying that. Chad, can you give me a 5-minute warning before the end? I think this is automatically going to end about 10 minutes before. But I wanted to talk about one person in my group. So we were up at Mount Pekdu, this place I was telling you about where Crater Lake is up here. And we were sitting on our bus and we were making a pit stop. Now that's a code word in tourist language for nature stop, which is a code word for using the restroom. But in Korea here, there weren't really restrooms. We would call them latrines because they were outdoor latrines, and they were the pits, literally, like open pit, women's side, men's side, but definitely not a pretty picture. So we're sitting on the bus waiting for everybody to make their pit stop. I'm just sitting on the bus with the rest of the group. Almost everybody was on the bus at that time. And my Korean guide comes, here's the melody. So they jazzed up this melody, and here's kind of a jazzy, fast part. I get tears in my eyes just hearing this melody, though. It's just so beautiful, and it kind of grows on you. Now songs grow on you. I'm in Narita Airport sometimes, and at the lounge of ANA Airlines, All Nippon Airways, they have this music going on inside their lounge, and they play this. Like every hour, they play this melody, and I go, what are we doing? We're in Japan. But I figured out, a lot of the workers at the airport, many airport workers are from other countries because it's low-level work and not good pay. So there's Korean immigrants there. So they probably have access to the to the players, and they play their Ari wrong. That's why I figure out why he's still even here in Japan. So back to this story. So the guide comes running onto the bus, and he's really angry. I can just tell. I'd never seen him angry at all. He's always been nice and polite, and he's just, Gary, I want to talk to you outside the bus. Please come outside. I go, okay. I go, wow, that's what's happening. And he says, he calls me like 20 yards away from us, and he says, I just found Diana taking pictures of the latrine. And I go, yeah. He says, well, as you know, you cannot take pictures of anything without permission. And I go, oh, well, she's from America. I said, we don't really have latrines. And so he says, and I'm going to confiscate her camera. And I go, and I said, confiscate her camera for taking pictures of the latrine? He says, you know the rules. And he caught me, busted. I had to go on his side on this issue. We were told before the trip ever started. We signed a statement. We will not take pictures without asking permission. So even though I don't agree with the rule, I don't like it, I think it's stupid, but I know we all agree to it. I said, okay, I agree. You're right. I said, how about a compromise? I said, how about if we'll call her over here, and I'll do the talking. I'll say to her, Diana, Kim has noticed that you were taking pictures of the train, and he wants to take your camera. He wants to confiscate your camera. As you know, we're not allowed to take without permission. And I said, then I will say, if you agree to delete all those photos you just took, he will let you keep the camera. And I said to the guy, how about that? How about if we do that? He goes, okay. So I call Diana over, and I say, Diana, Mr. Kim's come and confiscate your camera, and he would call taking pictures. I was just taking pictures of the train. I said, Diana, you know the rules. And then I turned to Kim and I said, Kim, how about if she just deletes every picture right here, and then she gets to keep the camera? He goes, if she agrees. I said, Diane, do you agree? She goes, okay. So she got her, he stood right there while she deleted those photos. So another time I told you about how we have to sign a statement, say we agreed to bow to the statues, that it will happen a few times throughout the trip. So on the last day, we're bowing in front of this statue of Kim Il-sung. And when they teach you how to do this, so we all line up, we were a group of 15 plus 1. That means the tour leader is 16. We line up in a row, we walk up like this, all together, and then when we come to the statue, we all bow together. So as we were doing this on the last day, we knew this was just about our last bow, hopefully, because we get pretty tired of that stuff. We signed the agreement, we agreed to do it, but we're kind of getting tired. And as we're bowing down, the guy next to me goes, Gary, I've been counting. This is about the 8th time we've had to do this, and the material said it'd only be a few times. And we were all of us were giggling quietly. Our guide, they stayed behind us on 20 feet, so he was, whispering this. And but we were all kind of giggling inside, like, this is a good thing. This is the last day. We're about ready to go home. But now to this show, which is only got a few minutes left to it. But look at the fact there's times there can be up to 5,000 performers on this field. And then there's 20,000 doing the pixels in the background. And they say at each show, there's about 100,000 performers, because this show goes on for 2 hours. So each group comes out here. How many are in this one? What, 1,000? 2,000? Start counting the lines. So, in 2 hours, you got these little girl ballerinas, you got these high school boys, you got, all this whole show is going on. Guess how much the tickets were? A pretty penny. Top tickets right at the 50-yard line, over $400. Our tickets were, I think they were $320. Isn't this cute? Is this cute or not? I mean, you got to hand it to the communists. Some of them have some good ideas, right? So our tickets were like $320. Then they also had like $280 and I think $180. You could get them for $180. But this was such a fantastic show. And by the way, there's fireworks going on in the background sometimes, and the music is really nice. And they play a lot of orchestral music. I mean, not just Are We Wrong, the song we were listening to, but classical, and Mozart, and it's. I mean, what a production! And do you know that after our group saw this, we saw this one of the first nights we were there. The next week, someone came up to me and said, "Gary, about 9 of us would like to go and see the show again. Can you arrange that? Can you get tickets for us?" I said, "You want to pay another $320?" And they go, "Yeah." There were 9 people who forked out an additional $320 to go see the same show a second time. Now that's voting with your pocketbook. I would have gone too, but that's too much money. So this is what you can do when you have a communist government and you have the people enslaved. You don't even have to pay them to do this. And we never got a straight answer on, do people get paid to do this? Like, what about those people that just show up those cards, They got to show up every night and do that? And are they getting paid? We're not sure they're getting paid. Maybe they're getting paid $1 or something for the evening. We can assume the performers, they're probably getting something, because if not, they're getting honors, because it's an honor to get to be a performer at this show, because this is their greatest cultural production in the country. And it is here's the cabin where Kim Il-sung, his son was born. So remember I told you about the secret camp where they fought against, as guerrillas, they fought against the Japanese. So you can see there's always politics being, there's always politics being brought into this. So there's always pictures of their great leaders and about great moments in their communist history when they pushed the Americans back and, all that stuff. Well, I think we only got, how much time we got?
7 minutes.
7 minutes. So I think we'll just let this play out until it's, I think, 17:20 or something like that on the timing, and which I think is real close to the time now. And I'll start taking questions because we just have about 7 minutes left. Any questions? Yes?
How often is this show, this production put on?
It's only done during certain times a year, which means the summer. July, August, September. And the reason is it's an outdoor show, and quite frankly, you wouldn't want to do it in winter. The winters are bitterly cold in Korea. We know this from our soldiers that were there from 1950 to 53, and even our 29,000 soldiers that are in Korea still today in the southern part. So it gets really cold there, so you wouldn't want to be out here in the wintertime. So summer evenings are nice. Now the summers are like here, hot and humid. Not a nice time to do this, but you do this in the evening. Always would do this at night. Because they use so many, the fireworks and the laser lights and all that stuff. So the time to do this is in the nighttime. Yes?
The audience looks like it's full, and if they're doing it every night, are they mainly tourists in the audience, or do they actually have Northern Koreans in the audience that can afford those tickets?
There are lots of North Koreans that watch this also. They would tend to be the elite. which is about 10% of the population. So if you work for the government, and since it's a communist country, a lot of people work for the government. But if you have a management job, you're treated well. That's what keeps that regime going, is you got 10% that are the base. You know, they really want to keep this thing going because they got a good deal. They get to go to free shows, or maybe they only have to pay a few dollars. And even a person that isn't a Communist Party member, maybe they'd only have to pay a few dollars. And there are always tourists there. Now, our stadium was not full. I would say there was probably only about 15,000 spectators, even though that stadium holds 130,000. With 20,000 are those pixels in the background, and then across the field, facing that, where we were, where the video was taken, and so all that. There were thousands of people there, but not full. Definitely was not a full stadium. But I bet there are times when they are, when they maybe the first showing or the first second showings when they kind of do a rehearsal showing. Maybe people could get a free ticket. It's hard to get those details. Any other questions? Yes.
Business activity. You just didn't explain anything about how they live, what they do.
Well, it's really a military.
Take pictures, but,
It's basically a military economy. It's a centrally planned economy. It's a totalitarian communist economy, which means the Politburo and the extensions, the managers of the Politburo, are the ones that organize the economics. They figure out who needs to grow food, how much food we need, and so you don't get a lot of wages, but you get subsidies of food. So you got these many farmers here growing the wheat, and they're expected to meet their quotas, and then you got this factory that's making shoes, and we expect you guys, we're going to need 8 million pairs of shoes for the coming year, so here's your da-da-da, and then you get the leather from the guys that are raising cattle over here. So but it's all centrally planned economy, so this is not private business. Now, one new thing that has started in North Korea in recent years, because their economy is going down, they can't keep subsidizing people. There's been starvation. There's been horrible droughts. There's been famines, and they haven't been able to. And so what they've done is they allow people to start growing their own and even sell their own, and that they can do markets now. This is how China started in the late 70s with Deng Xiaoping. I lived in China during those years. I got to see the first markets started. So people were growing a little cabbage and carrots on the side, and they were allowed once a week to come to a market and sell those things. And so that's really what's allowing this country to just barely keep going. Yes?
what, if anything, do they export?
They export a lot of military weaponry, because they are advanced in military weaponry, and it is a militarized state, and the economy is a military economy. So, in the past, they have sold like missile technology to Iran. They helped Iran in their earlier nuclear program, which Iran has now divested of, but in those years, North Korea was involved in that. And Libya was on the path of a nuclear program, and North Korea was involved. North Korea is a pariah state. They'll do things they're not supposed to do. The United Nations may say nobody's allowed to sell nuclear technology, but North Korea will, and they did. So Libya, that's how Pakistan got help to make the bomb. Pakistan had a lot of help from North Korea. So, and they have good weaponry, guns, tanks, and there are still countries that are behind this because they offer good prices, because they can be very competitive and they need the money. Yes?
What do you think Russia backed off of controlling interest of the country? You don't hear Russia, its name being spoken in this day and time of trying to cultivate a relationship that would disarm them, and you just talk about China.
Russia's kind of holds themselves at arm's length now, but that's because of the fall of the Soviet Union. So really, the Soviet Union gave birth to the communists of North Korea. They supported the communists of North Korea. It wasn't just Chairman Mao in 1950 when he sent his troops over, but from 1945 on, when those two parties that eliminated the Japanese Empire, the Americans from the south and the communist Russians from the north, the Soviets, when they met at the 38th parallel, That was a temporary. They couldn't solve the problem. How are we going to unify Korea? And so the Soviets actually trained and supplied the North Korean communists from 1945 until 1950. They were so well trained and so well armed. That's why they pushed the Americans almost to the sea. Because the Americans, after the war, we lowered our military budget. We weren't at war with anybody. We didn't keep our army supplied properly, and we got run over. To our great surprise, we had no idea it was a surprise attack, and they had been supplied by the Soviets. Remember, that was the beginning of the Cold War era. But with the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, the Soviet aid to North Korea pulled out because they were no longer communists anymore, so they're not going to keep helping this communist country. They still of course they had relations, and they wanted to sell them weapons then they started to sell them weapons and so forth. So Russia still maintains, because of their history, they still have friendship, they still have diplomatic relations, which the U.S. doesn't, and Russia still has some level of relations with North Korea, but they don't really like what North Korea is doing either. They don't like that they have nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. They joined the United Nations condemning North Korea for doing this. So in the Security Council, Russia could veto these sanctions that are made against the North Koreans, but they don't. Even China doesn't. So the whole world is against North Korea developing nuclear weapons, including Russia. But on the other hand, when Russia thinks America's got too heavy of a hand on it, they'll criticize the Americans for what they're doing with North Korea. So a lot of sanctions, banking sanctions and so forth, maybe Russia can still benefit from with North Korea. They won't agree to all the sanctions. Yes?
At the end of World War II, it was my understanding that the Russians came down and they captured a lot of Japanese scientists that were developing the A-bomb and took that information back to Russia, and that's how they developed it, one of the reasons.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Well, it is, and that's also what the Russians did with Germans, too, just as we did.
Yeah.
Werner von Braun, the leading rocket scientist of the Germans, Americans got him, and he's the one that moved our space program forward. So the Russians were doing the same thing with Japanese as well. That's also true. I think we're past time. Or should we?
You can take one more.
One more question? Anybody else? Yes.
Can you explain how the North Korean government exports workers to the homeland to other countries?
Yes, they do. North Korea, for example, has factories in Ulaanbaatar of sewing factories. They export Korean women and have a factory in Mongolia. And they basically get paid a certain amount by the Mongolians. It's a way for them to earn hard currency. Another thing they do is they're very good at bronze statues, as we saw. I mean, the whole country is just dotted with these huge statues, which we have to bow down to all the time. They're very good at these. I mean, they have some of the largest bronze statues in the world. And so they export that skill. Not only do they export the statue, but they make the statue in the place where they're making it, because some of them are so big. In other words, they send the men and materials and sell that product in country where they're going. For example, Dakar, Senegal bought a deal. They paid $25 million for a statue complex. It was like a sort of a national monument, and $25 million. And they probably, walked away with, $15 million in profit from that endeavor. And Namibia, another country that bought bronze statues. So they're doing these kinds of jobs all around the world to earn hard currency. And another thing they're doing is they're mining gold and then sending it out through diplomatic pouch and then getting cash for it. So these are ways that North Korea, even all these sanctions against North Korea, all these banks can't do business with them anymore. But they do a lot of stuff through diplomatic pouch. You probably know, most of you would know, that the international diplomatic relations, one of the rules of international diplomacy is the use of diplomatic pouch is completely unrestricted. In other words, anytime, say, the American Embassy in Berlin today, they want to send back sensitive spy material back to Washington, D.C. through diplomatic pouch, paperwork, or whatever, anything like that, that doesn't get inspected. And all countries agree to honor that. So any embassy is allowed to receive and send things out. The North Koreans have been known, like that's how they got they sell hashish, they make counterfeit US dollars, send it out in a diplomatic pouch, like they have relations with Bangkok, Thailand, and then from Thailand they, buy uranium or what stuff like that. Okay, thank you. It's time. Thank you very much.